Ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa. Ko waio, ko rimutaka tōku maunga, ko whakatiki tōku awa, ko aurora tōku waka, ko Kotarani o Scottish tōku iwi, ko Katrina Coleman tōku ingoa no Aronga mai ahau. Ko Blair tōku hoa tānei, ko Lucy taku matamoa, ko Thea taku pōtiki. He National Educator whanau awhina tukutonga mahi, nō reira tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi koutou katoa. Kia ora whanau. Firstly, thank you so much for having me along to share in this learning journey with you. Many of you will know me. My name is Katrina. I have worked for Whanau Awhina Plunkett for coming up 12 years, and I am in the education team. I'm also a current doctoral student at AUT in my 5th year. My academic interest is in childhood adversity, and more specifically, how that adversity goes on to impact maternal mental health outcomes in adulthood. I'm also a mindfulness facilitator. Aroha mai. My apologies that I can't be with you today. Kanohi ki te kanohi. I know that when we're talking about topics that can stir up emotion in us, it can be really useful to be together, but for today that just isn't possible. And I still think this learning will be really worthwhile for us all. It's really important that you feel safe in this session. So just at this moment, I want you to think about where your brain goes when we talk about trauma and early life adversity. Maybe you go to a place or time in your own childhood. Maybe you think about your role as a parent. Maybe you're thinking about whānau or people that you are working with. If at any time this session becomes too much for you, please feel free to step out, to ground yourself on papatūānuku and take some mindful breaths. And please talk about this session with someone that you trust. If you're anything like me, you're going to want to know what this session's going to cover. So firstly, I'll revisit the topic of adverse childhood experiences, and then we'll participate in a mindful meditation. We'll talk about mindfulness and its benefits, especially for those who are affected by childhood adversity. We'll then look at my preliminary research findings, and we'll consider our role in working with whānau impacted by early life adversity, exploring strategies for self-care and for grounding. I'm wondering, how many of you have heard me talk on the topic of ACEs before? So for those of you who are new to adverse childhood experiences or ACEs theory, it's a body of research that was first uncovered in 1998, a large-scale study of over 17,000 participants in Kaiser Permanente in the United States. The lead researchers, Felitti and Under, identified that 64% of their participants had experienced at least one measure of significant adversity in their childhood. ACEs are not minor hardships or setbacks. They are physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, mental illness, substance abuse, or incarceration of a parent, parental separation, and witnessing family violence. Felitti and Under discovered that as the incidence of adversity increased and the participants' ACE score increased, so too did the deleterious health and social consequences they experienced in adulthood. So the higher the ACE score, the worse the health and social outcomes were for that individual. ACEs are linked to almost all chronic health problems, mental illness, and substance abuse in adolescence and in adulthood. ACEs can also negatively impact education and learning, job opportunities, and earning potential. There are complex social and pathophysiological reasons for this, but to simplify the cause, you have to understand the sympathetic nervous system's response to stress. So when the brain is exposed to stress, a cascade of neurochemical and hormonal changes take place, which play out as the fight or flight response. Now, this response is important because it keeps us safe. If we're crossing the road and we see a car appear suddenly, this response allows us to speed up so that we don't get hurt. However, when you're exposed to adversity that is persistent and unpredictable, that sympathetic nervous system is activated over and over and over again. And instead of being life-saving, it becomes damaging. Unlike positive or tolerable stresses, which we can all experience in childhood, which can help lead to resilience, the excessive and prolonged nature of what is called toxic stress increases our risk of lifelong problems, both physically through the wear and tear of organs and biological systems, and within the brain, where the toxic stress can critically disrupt the properties of the developing brain, changing the brain circuitry involved in higher order cognitive processes. This is particularly important in the first 18 years of life, as the developing brain is more plastic and permeable to the potentially neurotoxic endogenous mediators of that stress response system. But before we get too overburdened here, let us not forget that ACEs are treatable and ACEs are preventable, and we can play a role in that mahi. So that's the basic foundation of ACE theory, but with your permission today, I'd like to take this session a little bit deeper. But before we do, I want to acknowledge that all of you have brought with you into this time of learning today baggage. Look, I'm under no illusion that you guys have a whole life outside of this professional development. Maybe you came in today feeling worried about the kids getting to school, or that your partner will know what to put in your kids' lunch boxes. Maybe the kids are sick. Maybe you're studying, or you're volunteering, or you're looking after a whānau member. And you can feel how thinly engaging in this learning today has spread you. Maybe you're worried about a whānau that you're working with, and you're finding yourself distracted and wanting just to check in with them. Look, we all have stuff. We all have emotional baggage that we just drag around with us wherever we go. And that's okay, because we all do it. But in this precious time that has been set aside just for you, I want you to give you that support to leave that baggage or those suitcases at the door. And we're going to do that right now together by participating in a mindfulness exercise called Dropping the Suitcases of Worry and Regret. It's one of my favorite mindful exercises from mindfulexercises.com. So to help you reduce any anxiety, let's take a moment to relax your body. Just soften any unnecessary tension in your neck, in your shoulder, in your belly. Find a posture that feels both relaxed and alert. Now, inoi tatou, close your eyes or look downwards and just rest your hands in an easy and effortless way. Take a few moments to scan your awareness through the sensations of your body, and wherever possible, soften and release obvious areas of physical tension. Aware of your body breathing, your chest rising and falling with each breath. And now imagine that you're standing in the street outside of your house with two heavy suitcases. And knowing that one of these suitcases is full of worries about the future, and the other suitcase, knowing that is full of regrets about the past. Then take a moment, standing there in the street holding these two heavy suitcases, just to reflect on each one. Reflect on the future, how it will come on its own accord. And whenever it comes, that most of what we worry about will never even happen. Standing out there in the street, reflecting on the past, the other heavy suitcase. Consider how the past cannot be changed. All we can do in the present is learn from it, put in place whatever corrections make sense, and become more skillful, become a better person, and move on. Standing there in the street, feeling the weight of these suitcases and absorbing the wisdom of your own reflections right now. Make a conscious decision. Do you want to drop the suitcase of worry about the future? And if so, simply drop it. Simply drop it. And then there, standing in the street with the other suitcase so heavy about the past, make a conscious decision. Do you want to drop it? And if so, just drop it. Just drop it. And as soon as you have dropped the two suitcases, walk into your home, take your seat right as you are and plop down. So relaxed, like someone coming home from a long trip, dropping suitcases and just relaxing, rested in the present. Just breathing, resting in the natural well-being of the parasympathetic nervous system. Resting in the fundamental well-being of awareness itself. Awareness which does not worry or regret. Resting as if this is meaningful for you. Allow yourself to simply rest. Feeling a sense of joy and peace and haora. A natural happiness without carrying heavy suitcases of worries about the future or full of regrets about the past. Simply rest here in your body right now in total relaxation in your body and mind. Okay. How was that for you? Mindfulness has been an integral part of my learning and healing journey, but I actually found it really difficult when I first started. I thought it was super fruity and I could never see myself getting into it. The challenge with that, however, was that mindfulness just kept popping up in the academic research. I could not escape it. Mindfulness was viewed as the single most significant strategy for the healing of adversity. And as a trauma researcher, I owed it to every person who came up to me after I would present on ACEs saying, "That's me. I have 4 ACEs," or "That's me. I have 6 ACEs. That's me. I have 10 ACEs. What can I do to heal?" Mindfulness is a great place to start. And even for those who haven't experienced early life adversity, We live in a time and culture that celebrates busyness, that being accomplished means helping out with multiple groups and committees and activities. I want to read to you one of the best analogies that I've ever heard of mindfulness. If you could, just close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or just rest your eyes down low and imagine the words that I'm saying. Our busy, agitated, and distracted mind is like a jar filled with muddy water. As long as it is agitated, the mud clouds the water and doesn't allow light to pass through. However, if the jar remains still, after a few minutes, the mud will settle so that the water becomes clear. Okay. It's interesting. In my study of mindfulness, I've learned from Māori kaiako that mindful practice is something that Māori have just always inherently practiced. Māori recognise the benefits of movement, not only for te taha tinana, our physical health, but for the rhythmic regulation of the heart, the breath, for your hinenaro and for your wairoa. Some traditional Māori examples include wakaama, kapahaka, poi, weaving, puoro, tāmoko, and te rako. Okay, that was just an aside. Let's move on to my research. So I want to share with you a bit about my journey and also a sneak peek at some of the preliminary research findings. So why research childhood adversity? One of my lecturers early on in this doctoral journey revealed all of our class's vulnerabilities by saying to commit to at least another 4 years of your study, to stick with it, you have to be self-centered and choose a topic that's really relevant for you. I've recently been awarded the Margaret May Blackwell Fellowship, which means that this time next year, my whānau and I will be travelling around Canada and the United States to meet research leaders and service providers who lead this space internationally. A few years back, my colleague Anne Hodgren received the same fellowship, and when she came back from the States, she lit a fire in me about this incredible research linking early life adversity to poorer health and mental health in adulthood. I was hooked. I wanted to know everything I could on the topic. I remember the day at National Office when I first took my own ACE-10 assessment. As I was adding up my score, Anne gently leaned over and asked me if I was okay. Now, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had permission to not be okay, and yet all I felt was relief. I had an evidence-based reason why I had struggled in areas where others hadn't, why aspects of parenting were so triggering for me, and why I had to work so hard in myself to not really lose it with my kids. My early life experiences, as yours have, determined how my genes have been expressed. They've predisposed me to risks of disease and, as the literature indicates, have strongly put my children at risk of intergenerational ACE-related harm. However, adverse childhood experiences are not a get-out-of-jail-free card. The ACE score, that gives you the what, and then ACE theory gives you the so what, but you have to do the work to determine the what now. I've been so blessed to learn about ACEs and their impacts and healing when my babies have been so young, but it is never too late to start healing from your early life adversity, whether you have an ACE score or not. It's also really important to acknowledge that there are other forms of significant adversity that are not included in the ACE-10 assessment form. There's trauma from death of a family member, the impact of poverty, racism, and colonisation, just to name a few. Positively, these additional trauma measures are being included in some of the bigger international studies that are being conducted currently. I have something exciting to show you. Okay. Ever since I learned about the Japanese art form of kintsugi, I have wanted to own a piece. There's a very clever artist in Tamaki Makoto who created this beautiful piece. I'll just move back to make sure you can see it. I think that kintsugi is such an important lesson for how we approach trauma. Katie says there has to be cracks to let the light in. The beauty in kintsugi is the gold, the repair or the healing. And I wonder, what does this healing look like in your own journey? Who's played a significant role in your healing and your journey to self-discovery? Maybe take a minute just to send them some warmth and gratitude now. I would like to offer you a therapeutic tool that you can use in your practice and also at times of stress or distress in your own life. It is a stone. I wonder if there are places, rivers, lakes, or the beach that are special to you where you could select your own stone, or maybe you'll be given a stone today. This stone can be your here and now stone or your grounding stone. There's no denying that the mahi that we are doing is becoming more and more complex. Many whānau are increasingly stressed and burdened. And our lives outside of work are also increasing in complexity and in pace. So we're going to participate now in a short mindfulness exercise called grounding using the here and now stone. So once you select your own stone, you can hold your stone while engaging in this practice. So let's just start by carefully examining your stone. Noticing any colour, the angles, the way that the light plays off the curves. Allow yourself the joy to engage in the sight of your stone. Now close your eyes, inoi tato, and explore your stone using your sense of touch. Is it smooth or is it rough? What is its temperature? Hold your stone and feel how solid it feels in your hand, unchanging to the pressure that you apply on it. Open your eyes and let yourself become absorbed in your stone. Pour yourself into the experience of handling this beautiful stone and allow yourself to experience this stone with all of your senses. And now just notice that when you are wholly focused on your stone with appreciation, there is little room for regret or for worry, for the past or the future. You are at home in the present moment. Going forward, if this is useful, you can keep your stone in your pocket, and whenever you feel swept up or overwhelmed with emotion, just hold on to your stone. Feel the grounding sensation of touching your stone. Come home to the present moment. I just want to encourage you, this has been really helpful for my big girl, my matamua, who can sometimes struggle with really big feelings. She finds using the grounding stone incredibly therapeutic for her. And in fact, sometimes when I go and kiss her goodnight when she's asleep, she'll be asleep holding her stone. And I just think, wow, doesn't nature provide us with so many solutions to a lot of the problems that we experience today? Alrighty, so let's move on to my research findings. So in 2021-2022, I undertook an online survey of New Zealand mama engaging in whānau-whina services, and over 500 mama participated. You may ask yourself, why only mums? Do the ACEs of fathers not matter? They absolutely do. However, within international research in both human and animal models, the ACEs of mothers are more significantly correlated to the outcomes of their offspring. It may be to do with their time in utero, or that mothers are more commonly the primary caregivers, but for the purposes of this research, I chose to just focus on mama this time. So the first part of the survey contained a lot of socio-demographic questions: ethnicity, income, marital status, age, education, etc. And the reason for this is so we can see who appears to be most significantly impacted by ACEs, and also to allow for a deeper analysis to compare findings within different groups of mums. For example, I was surprised to see that geography did not seem to impact ACE scores within this population. So the ACE scores were not significantly different between mama who lived in rural settings and mama who lived in highly urban settings. Okay, the second part of the survey was the ACE-10 assessment tool. Participants were asked to report the ACEs that they experienced in their first 18 years of life. The third section of the survey included the PHQ-3 tool that we use within whānau-whina, but with the addition of an anxiety screening question. And then the DAS-21, which is a far more comprehensive scale measuring depression, anxiety, and stress. The survey closed with a page of available support and counselling for those who found the survey distressing in any way. So, you are some of the first people to hear my unpublished findings. Here we go. Who were the participants? Participants were 84.8% European, 9.3% Māori, and 8.2% Asian. 4.7% identified as other. Pacific mama made up only 1.2%. Middle Eastern, Latin American, and African also made up 1.2%. The most common age band of mothers completing the survey was from 30 to 34 years of age. The majority of participants were married or in a civil union at 83%. 12% of mothers were not in a current relationship. Over half of the mama had given birth to only one child, with a total mean of 1.58 children per participant. Participants were then asked about their childhood home and to report who lived there most of the time. Most mothers, around 75%, reported having both of their biological or adoptive parents in the household during their childhood. 14% of mothers reported living with parents who were separated, and 9.3% said they grew up without a father ever present. 1.2% of mothers reported they were raised by relatives, foster parents, or in a care facility. The education level achieved by this participant group was high. The median household income bracket, bearing in mind these mama, a lot of them would have been on maternity leave, but for the household was $70,000 to $80,000 in the last financial year. So who were this group? Well, they were the kind of mums who generally engage in research, predominantly well-educated and well-resourced mama. But this is a really important point to remember when we start looking at the ACEs and maternal mental health data. I just want to take a moment to check in. Is this interesting for you? If it is not, if data totally isn't your thing, that's fine. Just let it wash over you. But I've got a little bit more I just want to share. So moving on to the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences. For context, can everyone remember what the 10 ACEs are? Physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, mental illness, substance abuse or incarceration of a parent, parental separation, and family violence. Within this population of mothers who engaged with the survey, there was a prevalence of ACEs, that is, an ACE score of 1 or more, in over 72% of the population. So 72% of the mothers are mothering through a history of ACEs. And the mean ACE score, or the average, was 2.16. The most common ACE-10 measured was separation or divorce of a parent at 40%, followed by a household member who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide at 35%. Then the verbal abuse measure at 31%. As modelled by many international ACE prevalence studies, I then separated out the findings into low-risk ACE groups, which are participants with an ACE score of 1 to 3, and a high-risk ACE group, so participants that had an ACE score of 4 or more, and then a no ACEs group, just for comparison. Just under 1/4 of the study population reported 4 or more ACEs and were in the high-risk group, despite only 9.3% of the total population identifying as Māori. Almost 18% of the mothers in the high-risk group were Māori. When compared with the low-risk group, the high-risk group was younger, they were less likely to be married. A lower percentage of mothers in the high-risk group reported having both parents at home when growing up, 52% versus 74% in the low-risk group. There was significantly less educational achievement in the high-risk ACE group. Only 43% achieved New Zealand Higher School Certificate, Bursary, NCEA Level 3, 43% compared with 63% in the low-risk group. However, interestingly, the total household income data was similar in both the low-risk and high-risk ACE groups. Moving on to maternal mental health findings. So just to be clear, these were the total population findings. Participants were asked to complete the patient health questionnaire, the 3-question version, including an additional anxiety question. Only 33% selected no for all 3 questions. The questions that yielded the highest positive response were question 1, during the past month, have you been bothered by feeling down, depressed, or hopeless? This question yielded a 52% positive response. This was closely followed by question 3, during the past month, have you been worrying a lot about everyday problems? This yielded a positive response of 51.7%. And then finally, question 2, during the past month, have you been bothered by little interest or pleasure in doing things, with 41% providing a positive response to this question. So what do you make of this data? Does it surprise you? Would you have guessed that over half of mama that you are screening using PHQ-3 would screen positive for depression? Would you have guessed that over 50% of mama would screen positive for anxiety if we applied an extended tool? Moving on to the DASS. The DASS-21 records participant scores as levels ranging from normal to extremely severe. The most common level of depression reported in this study was normal at 59%. For the DASS-21 depression statements, the most common response was for statement 5. I found it difficult to work up the initiative to do things, reported by 68% of participants. This was followed by statement, I felt downhearted and blue at 58%, and then statement, I felt like I wasn't worth much as a person, with 45% of participants reporting a positive response. Like depression, the most common level of anxiety was normal at 70%. For the DASS-21 anxiety statements, the most common positive response was, I was worried about situations that I might panic and make a fool of myself at almost 50%, followed by, I was aware of dryness in my mouth at 46%, and then I felt I was close to panic, reported by 42% of participants. The scores for using the DASS-21 stress for the DASS-21 were significantly higher than the variables of depression and anxiety, and the level of stress categories were more evenly distributed to reflect this. The most common level was still normal, but only 29.8%, followed by moderate at 22%, mild at 17%, extremely severe at 15%, and lastly, severe at 14%. For the DASS-21 stress statements, the most common positive response was, I found it hard to wind down, reported by 81.8% of all participants. This was followed by statement 12, I found it difficult to relax, reported by 79%. Followed by statement 11, I found myself getting agitated, reported by 74.8% of the participants. Let's just remind ourselves in the moment that these results are not of patients of mental health services. These are the results of mama that we work with every day, parenting through significant stress and agitation and varying levels of depression and anxiety. Okay, the last section of my findings that I wanted to share with you is the association between maternal ACE scores and maternal mental health outcomes that I found using something called correlation analysis. So in short, were ACEs found to be correlated or associated with depression, anxiety, and stress? The answer is yes, statistically significantly yes for each of the measures, but most significantly for stress. And this leads me to reflect on our practice. What are we doing to reduce the stress of mama who are parenting through a history of adversity? New Zealand's very own research in 2019 that applied data from the Growing Up in New Zealand group of over 5,000 tamariki identified that the strongest predictor of protection against ACEs and toxic stress is the strength of the parent-to-parent relationship. I want to read that again. They identified the strongest predictor of protection against toxic stress and ACEs is the strength of the parent-to-parent relationship. So when was the last time that you prioritized a conversation about relationship between parents in a whānau? When do we talk about communication within parenting relationships and conflict resolution? How do we explore parenting expectations and the changing role of parents, let alone their childhoods that the parents grew up in a way that's meaningful for whānau? Look, I don't have all the answers, but what I do know from the research is that if we don't ask about early life adversity, we limit a mother's opportunity to share her story and to validate her worries about her parenting. I may have told you this story before, that some years ago when I was presenting on the topic of ACEs at a PARDA symposium, A very well-meaning midwife put up her hand and said, "Look, I don't have time to go opening up a can of worms with every mother that I meet." A very wise psychologist who was the educator at Parter at the time stepped in and said, "Oh, honey, you are kidding yourself if you think that can of worms isn't already open for that mama." So how can we be more therapeutic in our time with adversity-affected whānau? In summary, 1, develop your skills in being able to calm yourself so we can be therapeutic in our time with ACE-affected whānau. This is absolutely essential. What topics that we cover in our mahi trigger your own shark music? What are you going to do about that? Listen to people's stories. Number 2, acknowledge them. Don't try and solve people's problems. And consider when you're talking with people, are they in a thinking brain where they want to work through strategies and map out solutions? Or are they in a feelings brain where they want to feel heard and acknowledged and validated without the offering of solution? Number 3, provide practical supports for parents and children. Sometimes just the offering or the discussion around who could pick Bubs up from daycare, who could hang out a load of washing for you? Is there someone else who could make the kai tonight for the kids? You know, the practical supports can make all the difference for mama who are experiencing the disruption and dysregulation that comes with parenting through trauma. And number 4, continue in your own learning and your understanding of who you are and where you are at in your own journey. Invest in yourself. It is not selfish to become the best version of yourself that you can be. I'd just like to close with a mindfulness meditation. So if you have one, holding onto your stone to ground yourself. This is another one of my favorite guided meditations that's designed to generate gratitude. So sit upright in a comfortable and stable position where you feel fully supported. Your back and neck and head are straight, and hold on to your stone in your hand. Inoi tatou. Allow your eyes to gently close or maintain a soft focus, just gazing just in front of you. Take a slow, deep breath and bring yourself to the present moment. And begin the process of feeling more peaceful and centered. Breathe into your belly so it expands. And as you breathe in, and get smaller as you breathe out. Take a moment to mentally scan through your body for any areas of tightness or tension, pain, and breathe your warm, oxygen-filled breath into that area. And as you breathe out, let the tension release, breathing it out. Do a couple more breaths like that. Now notice any worries, any fear or anger, irritation, jealousy, or judgment. And just breathe into those emotions, noting them and allowing them to flow out as you breathe out. Another breath into any uncomfortable emotions and breathing them out, releasing them. Now, any thoughts or memories, plans, associations, lists, anything other than being here, breathing. Breathe into those thoughts. As you breathe out, allow the thoughts to flow out with your breath. Now that our bodies and emotions and thoughts are a little bit clearer, a bit more spacious and open, we can begin to focus on the events and experiences and people, our pets or possessions for which we feel grateful. First, recall that as you listen to me today, you already have several marvelous gifts. The gift of life itself, the most precious gift. Someone gave birth to you. Someone fed you as an infant, changed your nappies. They clothed you and bathed you and taught you how to speak and how to understand. The gift of hearing, so you can hear and learn, whether it's the song of a bird or the notes of a band or orchestra, the songs of singing voices and the sound of your own breath flowing in and out, the gift of a heartbeat, steady and regular, moment after moment, pumping fresh, life-giving blood to all of your organs. Think of all the things that we have today that make our lives easier and more comfortable than they were for our great-grandparents. We flip a switch and light appears. We turn a tap and clean, drinkable water flows out. We adjust the heating and a room will grow warmer or cooler. We have a roof to keep us dry when it rains, walls to keep out the cold, wind, windows to let in the light, maybe screens to keep out the insects. We enter a vehicle and it takes us where we want to go. We have access to machines to wash our clothes, and we have clothes to wear and places to store them. There are machines that store our food at just the right temperature and help us cook it without us having to gather firewood. We have indoor plumbing. We have public libraries that house thousands of books for free to anyone who wants to borrow them and read. We have public schools that can teach us to read and write, skills that were available to only a very few just a few hundred years ago. Now take a moment to reflect on all the thousands of people who have worked hard, some without knowing you at all, to make your life easier or more pleasant. Some who plant and grow and harvest food, some who transport that food to the market, a team of people who make the roads and the railways that make it easier to transport the food, another team who maintain those vehicles, and drivers and loaders and unloaders. Those who take the time to design the store, the shelves and the packaging that keeps our food safe and allows you to find what you need. The postal service, someone who delivers the mail and packages and others who deliver them. Those who maintain the servers so you can get and send emails and access the internet. Those who design operations and systems for the gathering and sorting and disposing of rubbish and recycling. Those who gather news stories and photos, and those who create the many mechanisms by which the news can meet you. all those who play sports, who create art or music or plays or poems or films to entertain and uplift you. And most of these people you have never met or barely know. Now consider the people and pets you know who enrich your life. Those who smile at you and cheer you on. Those whānau or friends or acquaintances or colleagues and peers. Those ancestors who worked so you could live well now. Those friends who supported you when you needed a shoulder or a hand. Take a moment now to reflect on your own reasons for feeling grateful in this moment. There is so much to feel grateful for in this moment now. Gratitude fills our hearts and minds, uplifting our spirit. Thank you. This closes our formal time together today. Ngā mihi.